Joining us now to talk more about these headlines is Anthony Cordesman. He is the Burke Chair in Strategy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he's also led studies on national missile defense, asymmetric warfare, weapons of mass destruction, and critical infrastructure protection. Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
A pleasure.
I'd like to begin, if you will, with U.S.-Russian relations. And I have a statement here that was released this week by Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said, "The era marked by attempts to create a centralized, unipolar global order is over now." Now, the AP is saying he is referencing a perceived global domination of the U.S. What do you think he means by that statement?
I think one has to be careful because this is more or less a propaganda statement. Russia has resumed its competition with the United States, with Europe. This is not a matter of the U.S. seeking a unipolar world. It's a matter of Russia trying to rebuild its strategic influence, its power, and its role. It's doing this in challenging NATO. It's challenging states like Sweden, neutral powers. It's expanded into areas like Libya, selling arms to Egypt. It's playing a major role in Syria. So we're talking about a real competitor, and it should not be surprising that Russian propaganda basically is going to try to blame the United States and find as many ways as possible to justify its own position.
How does a Biden administration approach Russia right now with a statement like that?
I think it does it very directly. It talks about the disinformation campaigns, things like trying to interfere in our elections, its expansion of military influence in the region. It is directly outlining where we have to compete with Russia, and you don't see the downplaying that existed under the Trump administration.
A Russian court has rejected a bid to release Alexei Navalny. Of course, he is the leader of Russia's opposition party. We just showed the protests in the streets last weekend. There are more planned protests for this weekend. Do you expect that the Russian government and Vladimir Putin will release Navalny in the coming days?
No, I don't. They've spent at least the last 5 years systematically strengthening the internal security forces. They can deal with these protests and deal with them in terms that democratic countries can't. And certainly we're talking about someone who is a hero in terms of standing up for democracy. But you have to understand this is only one arrest of many, of countless imprisonments of political opposition, of taking people out of office who have any kind of opposition or tension with Putin. We're not going to see this go away, and certainly this is not something where Putin can afford to appear weak or easily compromised.
Before I move on to China, and I do want to discuss what's going on in Wuhan, what is at stake in Russia right now? How does this play forward?
I think it plays forward that we, at least for this leader, Putin, are going to be in a constant state of competition with Russia, trying to find ways to deter it, to limit its expansion of influence. I don't think we face any direct effort to have a war, but we do face a power that's resuming its nuclear arms race. It is going to compete with us, and indeed with our strategic partners in Europe and in the Middle East, at least indefinitely into the future.
We mentioned just a moment ago that the World Health Organization is in Wuhan, China, investigating the beginning of the pandemic from a year ago. That investigation is underway. With that said, President Trump did take a tough line against China, not just on the pandemic, but trade. What do you expect from a Biden administration in dealing with China?
I think you're going to see very much the same competition with China that you did under President Trump. Some of this hardening of the U.S. position began under the Obama administration, and it's not a matter of partisan politics. China has gone from being a somewhat outdated army oriented military posture with weak technology to one whose policy is to directly challenge us by 2030, and its expansion of its role in Asia along this Belt and Road economic corridor elsewhere in the world is one where its current defense spending is more than 3 times what it was a decade ago, and it's now the second-ranking military power in the world.
Given your experience with the Department of State during both the Afghan and Iraq wars, I want to get your thoughts on the situation in Iran right now. What concerns you the most?
I think the problem is that we have not shown that sanctions or economic pressure really changes the behavior of the regime. More than that, it's expanded its influence into Yemen, into Iraq. It's a major force inside Syria. It's linked to the Hezbollah inside of Lebanon. Its missile capabilities now, even with only conventional weapons, can strike at the most critical targets in the Gulf and in much of the region. So we're watching an emerging military power that's actively hostile, that has resumed some of its nuclear weapons developments, and is not only competing directly, but competing through third parties like the Hezbollah and other extremist movements.
Real quickly, I've been told final question here, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on another flyover in the Middle East region. What should people at home be watching for in the coming days and weeks?
I think the most important development in the near term will be whether we can find some way to renegotiate the nuclear arms agreement with Iran and at least move forward in some ways. That's perhaps the most immediate test of whether we can move forward.
Anthony Cordesman, we appreciate your time tonight. A lot is at stake in terms of foreign policy as we watch the world very closely. Thank you again.